Welcome to Stop Hiding, Start Healing, the podcast where we dive deep into the transformative journey of self-discovery and healing from addiction and other life struggles with your host, Craig Brown, author, speaker, and recovery pastor. Craig and his guests will guide you through conversations that empower, inspire, and illuminate the path towards a more authentic and fulfilling life. Together, we'll explore stories of triumph over adversity, expert insights on personal growth, and practical strategies to help you break free from the pain of the past through Christ-centered recovery. It's time to let go of fear, embrace vulnerability, and embark on a remarkable voyage of healing. Join us as we uncover the wisdom that emerges when we choose to stop hiding and start healing. Now, here is your host, Craig Brown.
Welcome to Stop Hiding, Start Healing. So glad that you could be with us on this episode. So appreciate you, those that are viewing, those that are listening. As you know, Stop Hiding, Start Healing is for you. Those of you that may still be struggling, whether it's addiction or other life issues, challenges, you name it. I was prompted to launch this podcast and also write my book a few years ago because I kept observing people in churches, especially, that would go to hide instead of heal. And today we're going to be talking a lot about that with my guest. But at the same time, our goal, we hope that something that is discussed today will touch your heart in a way that will prompt you to want to reach out, get outside of fear and deal with the pain or whatever you're dealing with in your life, whether it be addiction or other life issues, or if you have a loved one. My guest today, we're going to be talking a lot about the role of wife, of spouse, when the other spouse is struggling with addiction and how that affects the marriage, the family, the finances, and everybody involved. My guest is Tanya Gioia. She's a compassionate, dedicated family recovery coach who understands the profound impact addiction can have on not just one person, but a network of lives. With a deep conviction that working with women can heal generations, Tanya has made it her life's mission to be a beacon of hope and transformation for those facing similar challenges. So I just want to welcome my guest, Tanya Gioia. Thank you so much for taking the
Craig,
time.
I really appreciate it. I appreciate you writing your book. All of this is for His glory and for the kingdom. And we're here to help make each other holy. And that is part of, as I got deeper into marriage, you don't think about it in the first couple of years, but as I got deeper in the marriage, that's part of what I learned were husband and wife's jobs too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You're also a podcast host, Sober on Purpose, a podcast. As we go along during our time together, towards the end, I want to offer all the resources that you have to help others, and that'll be one of them. Your Sober on Purpose podcast. Now, before we get to 2010, which was a defining moment in your marriage, your husband's struggle, your family, leading up to that, what was life like for you in your youth or growing up or, preparing you? Any struggles of your own, any other, challenges that you had to overcome that would have prepped you for that season of your life?
That would have prepped me for it, that I would have been aware of. That's the awareness piece. So, yes, looking back, hindsight's 2020. Looking back, I tell this story often that for whatever reason, I was not willing to submit my love life to God. I was willing to submit pretty much everything else, but not that, and especially not in college. So if there were 50 good-looking men in a bar, let's talk about where I really was. If there were 50 good-looking men in a bar, I would pick the one that was living with his mother, didn't have a job, had dropped out of school, and was probably using something. That's the connection that I was making. So long before I met my husband, I had some issues with relationships, love addiction, understanding. I didn't marry my husband because my life was in great shape. There were a lot of things that I was meshing up with this person on to heal me. You know, as little girls, we grow up with that story, that Prince Charming story. And I didn't think it really affected me. We weren't big Disney watchers in my house. I didn't think that affected me, but I didn't grow up with what I'm trying to teach my children now about how Christ has designed marriage and what it's really for, and people coming together with friendships and people understanding we have a mission in life, not just to serve ourselves, but to serve God. I didn't grow up with that. I would say I grew up in a pretty normal family. We did go to church. We were Christians. We did that. But somehow that whole marriage, dating, sex part of the relationship with God just didn't infiltrate. In fact, I was running my own life, my own way, not following biblical principles, and really got into a lot of trouble because of that. Nothing that would have kept me from completing college or getting a job, but some real heavy soul damage.
Really? No kidding. Now, what was your family environment like?
So I grew up.
Was it loving, supportive, nurturing?
Yes, loving, supportive, nurturing. Grew up in a 2-parent family. Had one younger sister. We moved quite a bit, but stabilized that early high school, went to church, participated in, I was a youth group every time the doors opened. But it's almost that double life that you're living. As I'm over here at youth group doing what I think I should be doing, but I haven't really turned everything over to God. And so in college, my girlfriend that I rode horses with introduced me to this beautiful young man. He had graduated earlier. We fell in love. We decided this was it. We got married. That didn't work. We were not basing it on biblical principles. We both had issues going on there. And I'm going to tell you something I don't tell everybody is I grew up when Friends was out. So think of the TV Friends. And for some reason, I'm looking at this television show. This is so vivid to me. I'm looking at this television show going, where's my ability to do relationships like this, to pick up this person and go out with that person and it doesn't really hurt and people just kind of change partners and da-da-da-da. I was already married by that time. And so it felt like something was missing. I wasn't living this glamorous life. I wasn't doing this. It felt like something was missing. It wasn't really that my marriage was missing. It was that my focal point of how to live life. And when you have this idea that your husband can be the be all and end all, and he needs to be there for you for everything, and you can turn to him for everything and be your best friend and do all these things like I was watching on TV, then you're putting way too much on a human being so that God's hole is not getting filled, but you're putting it all on this human being. I drank him in like people drink alcohol. I would have withdrawals if he wasn't there. I would say I need and I must have, and then became really controlling when I didn't get it. That was not much fun. So growing, it wasn't necessarily just growing up, but this is what I've told people, and what my husband and I have focused on is if you don't raise your kids, and it's not that my parents weren't there doing the best that they could, the world is going to raise your kids.
Oh, without a doubt. Oh, absolutely. Well, that is, that's what we're seeing. I mean, it's happened every generation to a degree. You know what I mean? But unfortunately, with all the influences and social media and all the different things that the enemy is using to wreak havoc on us, these young ones and innocent ones are the ones that are being, their souls are being wrecked.
And we don't even know it's happening, right?
And it's, that's how he operates, though. Very subliminal, very under the radar type things, a little bit, the drop on the rock over and over and over again, and then all of a sudden, it's now you mentioned, and that your soul, you mentioned your soul early on, and I really stress this, and that is the soul is the catalyst, is the nucleus for us mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. All four of those are so vital for us to live a fruitful, successful life, following God's principles. So you just mentioned that about your soul. There was something, you were living, your desires were in one place. Loved God, obviously. Youth group was a good place to go, and function. But at the same time, there was something missing there. And that happens to all of us to some degree. And you experience that in dealing with, those that you serve in recovery and families and wives especially. How important do you think that is moving forward for you? When did you get to the place where you weren't as codependent, and then you turned those areas in your soul over to God completely?
That didn't happen for a long time. I'm already in a second marriage. I have a second child, and my first child is getting ready to turn 5. So, old book, Rick Warren's Purpose Driven Life. I was reading that. I'm having a quiet time. I'm going to church. I'm doing all those things, but I am not cueing in that there's been some significant soul damage, and that I'm still trying to control the world around me to make it Tanya's world, right? So I'm reading this book, but I'm also getting up early. My husband worked late in the evening, and so I'm getting up early, and I'm going for a walk outside of these 20 acres that we own, and I'm praying and crying and walking and praying and kneeling and crying and walking and praying. And the boxer that's walking with me thinks that I'm nuts, but he's happy to have a walk. So we're out there doing that. And I keep reading The Purpose Driven Life, getting in the scripture around it, reading that, and going, what am I missing here? I keep giving myself away to people who can't fill me. Right? Even your children are not there to fill you up. Your children are there as a gift. Right. They're a gift from God. They're an opportunity to be a family. He puts those that are lonely in families. He does this on purpose. I needed to take back, and I did a lot of work with Sozos. I don't know, this is prayer ministry. A lot of work with Sozos on healing those soul ties. So long before I married my first husband, and then some episodes between first husband, second husband, I had given pieces of myself away. So I had to call those back to me. And one of the things that I was praying as, the boxer is bouncing around and I'm kneeling and reaching out to God in this early morning light, and say, God, it's time. Again, Tanya's still trying to control this. God, it's time. It's time for him to get sober. It's time to make this change. And God said, you're not ready.
No kidding.
And I went,
wow.
It's so
wow. So you're on the. And that's, man, I'm glad you said that. And I hope those spouses or wives and even husbands hear that, about being, yes, we have a spouse that's really, really struggling. But at the same time, if our entire focus, if we're so myopic on them and we overlook our own soul, our own transformation, growth, character development, healing, we're not going to be ready.
No.
And we're going to mess it up.
No. And here's the circle that I explained. So hang with me. I'm going to do this circle. It's kind of confusing. So when I am with a partner, when I'm with my husband, I need him to be well so that I can be well. So that if he's not well, then it's my job to make him well. And if I can't make him well, then obviously I'm failing at my job and not doing what I need to do. So I need to try even harder to make him well. And God's like, no. You're doing the wrong job.
Wow.
This is not your job. It took, I would say from that time where I'm walking and praying in that, it took probably another year for God to create a crisis that we had to deal with the situation. We could no longer, put our hands over our eyes, pretend we weren't hearing or saying or doing what we were doing. It took another year, which when you're a controlling person, that is very, very frustrating.
I can imagine. Now, what you're describing, of course, is really struggling with codependency. And the question is, were you fully aware of being so codependent on your husband and making him happy, making him well? And were you fully aware of that?
So here,
to a degree, I mean, had you been instructed about codependency and how that can wreak havoc on you personally?
Do you want to get even crazier? So I knew.
Sure.
I knew before we got married that he has a problem. I didn't know. I was a little naive about the depth of the problem. So here's what happened. Once he admitted it, decided that we were going to get married, because I said, I won't marry you if you're continuing to do this, right? Think I'm setting a great boundary.
Okay. Yeah.
Won't marry you. So on June 3rd, 2003, he had been to one AA meeting before. I bopped into Al-Anon, heard about the 12 steps, said, okay, 12 steps, 12 months, we're out of here. We got this done. Boom, 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 boom. We found the right people. We'll take care of it. Let's go ahead and do it. I knew. But just like, think about the righteous older brother in the prodigal son.
Yeah.
I knew in the way that he knew. I knew that my job was to do this and my job was to do that. But then when it really came down to brass tacks, I'm like, wait a minute. I'm doing all the right things, God. Why are you not rewarding me? Why are we not in a contractual situation where you are giving what I need? Same thing I'm saying to my husband. So yes, I knew, and I would frame it more as co-addicts rather than codependency. So in the sense, this need that I have from the other person makes me, and that's not a good word, has me act in a very similar way to when a person can't get the substance of choice. I get demanding. I get upset. I blow up in tears. I have done some crazy rage things. And that is fearful for the other person. It's fearful for the whole family.
Wow. So what you've described is that you're taking on all the same functions of someone that struggles with an addiction.
I am. So I would say for me, now there's a clinical codependency term, and then there's a co-addict, right?
Sure.
So you could be a double winner. You could have both, lucky you. But I would describe myself more as with the rage, with the desperate need to feel connection and love. I act more like the addict than I do
the codependent.
Well, and I say that codependency comes in a lot of different forms, but I act more in that way. If I can't get what I need, then I am going to, because here's the thing, people with an addiction are great problem solvers. They will get what they need, however they need to get it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, no doubt. The energy, the efforts, the manipulating, the everything, that their whole life is hour by hour, day by day to fulfill that need and that rewired brain that alcohol and pornography and drugs and other things totally damage and wreck. All right. So second husband, knew he had an issue, but you went in, he started, you, Al-Anon, him, AA. So was that anywhere near 2000? I mean, how far were you from 2010 where, all of a sudden it's, oh boy, he's getting sober and everything's going to be
so
great.
That was 2003. And I was
Okay.
35 when we got married. And so I said to him, this is a package deal. I want a baby. I mean, I don't want a baby before we get married. I want to get married and have a baby, but I want a baby. So that was my immediate project. Again, look at the co-addiction happening there. That was my immediate project. I was upfront about it. I'm like, this is, if we get married, I want a baby. I probably want two, but this is what I want to have happen. So we are in that phase. And what I didn't know, here's my naivete about addiction, because I didn't grow up with it in my family, was he had stopped for a period of time, but then continued. And his story is his story, but his use was much deeper than I understood. And what we know about all addictions, mine, anybody else's, they will degenerate if left unchecked, untreated in the sense of awareness of what's going on. They will continue to degenerate. So his continued to degenerate to the point where he was still coming home, but at the wee hours of the morning, he had added some more things to it. Friends were really beginning to notice. Even friends who were high users were beginning to notice. And I had begun to build a community around me. So we have this kind of year in advance thing that happens between God and I had begun to build a community outside of him because he wasn't there. He was pretty much checked out at that point. And I had friends, and I had church friends, and I had a sweet couple friend who they didn't have kids. I had young kids. They would come over for dinner once a week. We called it family dinner. He just wasn't available for things like that. So I was beginning to create this community. Wow. That was all part of God's plan. So when everything fell apart, I had a community around me, including my Al-Anon group, including some other things going on. Right. There was still a lot to learn, but now when the cops showed up that next time and things got in the paper and the courts got involved in restraining orders and, texting only orders, all those types of things, then it's public. There's no more of, I can't see it. I don't hear it. It's not happening. This is not really what's going on. It was so public that we both had to deal with it.
Wow. Because generally the wife especially and the husband from time, they suffer in silence.
We did that for a long time. We did our time doing that. And it's shame. It's shame. And even like you said earlier, that the church, bless their pea-picking hearts, the church is not always equipped to handle this.
No. Oh, no. As one that has served, fortunately in our church, our pastor has a deep appreciation for recovery and just transformation and healing and, but what I have observed over the last 28 years that I've been involved in Christ-centered recovery is that churches don't do a great job in helping people, especially people that struggle with addictions. Why? Because pastors aren't trained as substance abuse counselors or any of that, and they point to AA. Now, I appreciate you going to AA, but God's been taken out of that.
Celebrate Recovery. So I'm reading The Purpose-Driven Life. And then, later in our story, our church sends us to help set up. We got to go to Saddleback out there and meet Johnny and all of those folks and set up.
Oh, you went out to the
set up a Celebrate Recovery piece. So that I think anybody who's listening, if you're really looking for a program that has a Christ center to it and the strong components of AA, because AA was really born when it was born from the Oxford group, it was born with a
Right.
Christian component to it. You can still see it, but it's amalgamated. It depends on what group you're in.
Yeah. Well, again, it was based on the book of James when you really look at the history. And that's where when John Baker went to Rick Warren and said, I have an idea. And John Baker himself, was struggling with alcohol use disorder. And then, as a good senior pastor would do, or say, all right, you go start it,
Right.
Go create it. And I was a part of, my pastor asked me to launch ours back in 1999. Yeah. So I was a part of that for 23 years, just seeing miracle after miracle happen, So, but yeah, you're fortunate to have had your community around you when, your whole life took an entirely different direction with the publicity involved in your husband's struggle.
I'll put this in our struggle, and I must say, our little tiny church. So I live in a little tiny community. He had supervised visitation, and then we had kind of a split custody arrangement for a little while. Our little church stepped in. They hosted the visitation. They helped me, financial strain in all directions. So excellent. We had people around us when we were willing. Here's the key. When we were willing to admit how bad it really was, we had people who came in and said, we can help. But we had to ask for help. We couldn't put on our church face and say, oh, I'm all dressed up. I've got my makeup on and everything's fine. It's not fine. That's where CR can be such a gift in being a hospital.
Oh, yeah.
We don't need to just show up at church when we're well. We need to show up when we're not well.
That's why the church was created in the first place.
Absolutely.
That's why. But you mentioned shame. You must have been carrying that shame for so many years,
Craig,
and your husband as well. And the enemy just wreaks havoc on our soul. He can't touch our born again spirit, but he can go right after our soul. And in Psalm 23, when David says he restores my soul after everything David did, and then he led him on a path of righteousness.
Right.
And that's true. I mean, and in 1 John 1, 8 and 10, it says God is right and just to forgive us of our sins and cleanse us of all unrighteousness.
Amen.
And that is where shame is such a barrier for people, because they don't want to make the effort to be cleansed of all that unrighteousness they've carried all their years, because the enemy keeps pounding them with shame. And no, you're going to stay right where you are. But fortunately, your pain was greater than your fear, and you stepped out.
I didn't have a whole lot of choice. And that's just it. So when you get ready to pray the prayer, God, whatever it takes. And then I was also praying the prayer of, God, I'm too weak to move myself. I need you to move me. Because I did have a very close girlfriend point out, she said, I think you're kind of like the frog in the pot. You probably needed to do something a long time ago, but the water kept getting warmer and warmer, and you just adjusted and adjusted and adjusted. And that's with a lot of the women that I help, is they have adjusted and adjusted and adjusted to the point where their self-care is no longer there. Because just like the circle I told you about, they are living the other person's life. Because because it's best for the other person, because it's best for them. No. It's a very selfish thing. I was living his life because I wanted the family dream. I'd already had one failed marriage. I mean, think about the shame of that. I'd already had one failed marriage. Yeah. I brought two people into the world, and now I can't make this marriage work. How rotten am I? God was very tender. He was very supportive. And then I had a lot of women who just closed in around me and said, we're here. We're here to hear the hard parts. We're here to take you out on your birthday because we know there's not anybody else right now. We're here to come. I had this beautiful woman who, we had horses at the time, and her daughter wanted to learn how to ride. Well, I can't even get out on my horses because I've got an infant at home, right? So she came over, loved on my little ones, loved on all that. Her daughter and I went out. This was just a gift. This was an absolute tender gift from God saying, your self-care is important too, child. It's important that you have some fulfilling things in your life as well. And, that was pre-2010, but it was something because I was full-time parent. I wasn't full-time working, but I was full-time parent, house caretaker, anything that needed to be managed. I was managing it. He was doing his job for the most part, but that was pretty much all he could do.
Amazing. Now, did any of those women have similar experiences?
So I was in
their marriages?
I was in an Al-Anon home group, and what you learn as you learn in CR is that you're somewhere on the spectrum. Let's say there were ones that were worse, there were ones that were better, there were ones that turned around quicker. Everybody has this unique thumbprint, right?
But they have this, desire to step out of their own isolation and to be together to, support, pray, others and do, help. I mean, that's why I love Christ-centered recovery or recovery. I mean, that's what it's all about. I love people in recovery.
Absolutely.
Don't you?
Absolutely.
I mean, my goodness, if I'm going to hang out with anybody, I want to hang out with them.
It's the most real place to be. It's the most authentic place to be. But
True.
The one thing you learn, the first thing you learn in Al-Anon and a good CR group is, look, you can keep pointing your finger at them and saying they need to change. But guess what?
Yeah.
If you're waiting on somebody else to change so that you can be well, you may wait the rest of your life. And God offers all of us the opportunity to be well right now, whether that other person is still spinning or they've come into the light too. You have the opportunity to be well. So that's one of the main things I work with women about is they've lost their identity, Craig. They don't know who they are anymore.
Yeah.
It's coming back to themselves, figuring out what it is that they like, what they really want. That doesn't mean that you have to push the person struggling with addiction away. You can still be positive. You can still be kind. You can still invite them to participate. But it does mean that you get to go to bed on time. You don't have to take care of everything. And you need to figure out what it is that fills your cup, because you're trying to give to that person from a completely empty cup. And it doesn't work.
So, all right. So, I want to shift gears for you to be able to, because it's important that we talk, that we share with the women that are there now struggling, that are watching or listening to this. And I want to ask you a number of different questions about, to help them. So when everything was uncovered and you began from 2010 on, so over those months, years, at what point did you and your husband reach that point where there was stability, less dysfunction, all the different components and God's principles that He wants for our marriage? I know we're all still working on them. I know you don't have it all.
I love it that you say less dysfunction, because that's the truth. There's still dysfunction, honestly.
All around us. Absolutely. But anyway, how long or where were you over since, we're talking last 14 years. What have the last 14 years been like?
The crucible was because of the way the courts took hold of this. And when the courts take hold of it, they take hold of your life. The crucible was we had a 23-month separation. The first 3 months were no contact at all. We couldn't be
Okay.
within 100 feet of each
Okay.
other. The boys had to be transferred by church.
Okay.
And people will say, well, that must be awful. And you could have done it. It was precious, quiet time that I know I needed. You'd have to talk to him about his story. I know I needed it to just help my brain to rethink.
That be still, and know I'm God, and I am here for you. You've got to be restored, and I'm the one that's going to heal and restore you. Type. Yes.
So that was crucial.
Yeah.
As it moved on, we still weren't living together. We did separate therapy, and then we did almost 12 months of couples therapy with a Christian counselor as well, still going to our program groups.
Okay.
I had a dream. I actually had a dream about how we were to reunite, who was to be invited. We were to do it in the church with the pastor and his wife, who had been helping. She's still my spiritual director, who has been helping us along all of this time, who was supposed to be there, the soup supper that was going to happen afterward. So we did all that. And in all of that process, both of us had to do major shifts, not only in jobs, but also in how we treated the world, how we looked at each other. And God really gave us some gifts and a great opportunity with the Celebrate Recovery program, all of those pieces, and put mentor couples around us, because we were ready to receive at that point. So think about it. Prior to that point, I was praying for that. I wasn't ready. He wasn't ready. We were not ready to receive, not ready to put that out there. So if you really want to see some of that, on my YouTube channel are some really campy, I'm just going to tell you this from the beginning, are some really campy videos we did about the steps, and we did them together. And you can hear our different perspectives in there. So it's addiction. I've got to get it right. Addiction Recovery Connection is the YouTube channel, or Sober on Purpose. Either one, I think, will get you there. But there's some campy videos. I think they might be 10 years old now. So you can see that. You can hear what we're struggling with. So we did some of that. We did some of those things. And then as we are growing and changing, life begins to take off, right? And I love how you say less dysfunction. We're in that stage. We're 2 years away from an empty nest. Our oldest is already living in the next town over, working. I feel really successful. He's launched. Good. He seems to be a viable citizen at this point. So we're at a different, and I'm sure you've been through this, we're at a different negotiation in the marriage.
Right.
The last 19 years have been completely focused on us getting well, being a good nest for the kiddos. And now we're looking down the road going, okay, we're not sure what's next. We have a whole lot of tools, but we're not sure what's next. And I know for those listeners who've been through this, it's kind of a scary process. I mean, the focus of your life has shifted, and not just for moms, dads too. So that's where we are right now, is looking at that next phase going, what does this really look like for us? As the boys leave, the boys go and launch their own lives. How do we navigate that?
That's amazing. Now, but you're saying you've been launched. First of all, God's hand was on you all through college, all through youth group, everything. And you were being prepared for a time like this, because your ministry to other women now is absolutely phenomenal. And he's using your brokenness and everything you have been through to be there, as in your role to help other wives. I know 19 years worth of going through that. It's so hard, and I want you to speak to the wife now. That you've come out of that to be there as an instrument of love and care and support for other women. and that can never be overlooked.
Well, and I love the phrase that you're using, because I'm teaching, I'm facilitating a Beth Moore Bible study on Esther.
Okay.
Who was prepared
wow. Okay.
for, who knows? Maybe you're here for such a time as this, is what Mordecai says to her. And if you know the story of Esther, she's actually in a crisis when Mordecai says, you need to go talk to the king. She's like, you're 5 years too late. He hasn't called for me in 30 days. I don't think he even knows I exist anymore. And Mordecai says, you need to go and speak to the king. She's like, I could die. So when I don't necessarily want to say young, but when you are a wife, you realize this has gone way too far, that you cannot continue living like this, and that by you continuing living to this, so there's actually 4 C's. Can't control it, can't cure it, right? And you didn't cause it. So those are the 4 C's. But I learned this past year, there used to be a 4th one that says you contribute. Right? So you are contributing negatively or positively to this situation. And sometimes when we think we're going along to get along for the sake of the kids, for, financially was a big issue for me, for financial stability, all those types of things.
Right.
God may be saying, no, I'm going to take care of you. I've got a better plan for you. And in fact, beautiful daughter, you are getting in the way of the healing of your husband, because you're trying to play savior. And I can tell you, Craig, my motto was, I can handle it. And if you're not going to help me, get out of my way.
I guarantee you there are so many out there now, hearing that. And it's a hard reality for a wife, especially Andy, or a husband, to accept the fact that they're not making it any better.
It is. And the other piece is, when I sat with one of the private sessions with the therapist that we were both working with, and I said, I'm causing this to fail, and I am causing this not to work. And I took on total blame. That's not the way to go either, because
no, absolutely not. There's a balance.
Esther had a role to play in this, but what Mordecai says to her is, he says, if you don't do it, God will raise up somebody else. So letting go of that shame, giving that to God, letting go of the blame. Yes. And here's the piece, making the critical choices, because God has not put you in a marriage to be miserable. That is not why you are there. So if you are miserable, it's time to figure out where you lost your identity, and dare I say it, where you lost your identity in Christ, because we're all daughters and sons of the Most High, and He never meant for us to be miserable on this plane. Yes, we will have hardship, but suffering and misery constantly, that's not the plan.
Yeah. Now, so answer this question, and for that dear wife that's struggling there, why do, and let's, especially wives, why do wives, well, I'm answering my own question, shame, fear, why, well, for your experience, is it shame? Is it fear? Is it the unknown? Even, talking about a wife that's grounded in, loves the Lord in church, but they're living the silent suffering, and they don't speak up.
For me, in fact, Craig, the only reason I told my parents, and my parents are Christian, they love the Lord, come from great generations of that. The only reason I told my parents was because I was afraid that the children and I wouldn't have a place to live if he removed his economic support, because I wasn't working that much at that time.
All right. let's pause there, because I hear that a lot. Where am I going to go? I've got young children. I work part-time.
Yes.
I'm totally dependent on this nest of mine that I've created. I mean, there are all these different variables, there are all these barriers and that keep that one in bondage.
And you said it's in bondage. So when I work with women, I learned in the rooms, and then I learned with a lot more study, is God's not going to run you through something that you're not ready to handle. It may be tough. Some of the things he might run you through might be tough, but you're not ready to handle. So we work step by step, positive by positive. Where can you make changes? What people forget is they have a lot more control in almost all cases over their personhood, how they treat themselves, how they treat their spouse. And we've been fed some misnomers because the family is the most underserved in this equation. And here's a silly thing, is they are the biggest influence in long-term sobriety. But if you pluck somebody out, send them to the program, they get well, you put them back in a crazy system because the system has moved to be crazy, right? Put them back in a crazy system. Then either the person who got well says, I can't be in the system anymore. More marriages break up after sobriety. You've seen it. Or the system needs to be changed. That's what God was saying when he's saying, you're not ready. So I was so afraid of the financial issues that when it finally did come down that I had to take care of myself, I was amazed. People opened their freezers to me. They opened doors to me. Work showed up. I got a little bungalow house that was on a friend deal from the local ski hill. God had it laid out for me. I am not saying, and please hear me, I am not saying that there aren't people who could possibly be destitute, but some of that is because they're not opening their mouths and saying, I need help.
Amen. Yeah. What that's why you see this behind me. Stop hiding, start healing, because that's what I've observed for the last 28 years. One of the hardest things for any of us to do is to say, I need help.
Yes.
And that's where the enemy wreaks havoc on these sweet women, these dear, dear, dear women, where there's fear, embarrassment, and an abundance of shame. If they only, if they would realize that when you step up, and that, again, not every environment is safe, not every environment is full of trusted individuals, but they are there. And that's why I love Celebrate Recovery or Life Recovery groups with the New Life Ministries, and where it's Christ-centered, where that's the perfect environment to walk into and say, I need help.
And you have to do your part. So Christ never said to us, okay, I'm going to take care of you. You just lie down and sleep and eat bonbons on the couch and, do this. I'm painting kind of an ugly picture.
But what do you say to the woman that is just, she can barely survive with energy and taking care of the kids or working the part-time job? What do you say to that person that is absolutely depleted?
We start little tiny step by little tiny step. Where can you start going to bed on time? Where can you start making sure that you have a quiet meal? Who is it that you could bring in that could help you take care of the kids? Is there one person that could give you just a couple hours off a night? This is how all habits thinks. And this is how, this is what Christ modeled for us, right? He wasn't with the disciples 24/7. He's like, dudes, you driving me crazy. I'm going over here to be with the Father.
I'm out of here.
I'm out. Right? So it is, this is where the co-addiction, the codependency, our own disease kicks in. If I'm not handling it, it won't be okay. That's the letting go, because I'm playing God. I'm saying, look, I will save the situation, and I don't want anybody else to be part of it, because if I can make this right, then he will be okay, I will be okay, and our family will be okay, and we'll look like, I said Ozzie and Harriet to somebody the other day, and they were just too young to know what I was talking about.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What,
Who are you talking about?
well, I get. Yeah,
We
I
will
got
look
you.
like this perfect family in a magazine. Well,
Yeah.
nobody looks like the perfect family in a magazine.
No, there's no such thing, folks. There is no such thing. Man, that's it. Now here's something that I've had so many discussions about. The couple, all right, generally when that couple's struggling and one of them is dealing with an addiction, or they both, as you shared, and they generally, go for pastoral counseling, or let's go to marriage counseling. At least, let's drag you in there, let's go in there and try that. But what I have experienced is that when they both enter into either Celebrate Recovery or some Christ-centered recovery environment, she has to go to that room, he has to go to that room, and they both must work on their stuff individually before they can ever reunite, and get as closer to God to bring healing to the marriage. When you
Craig,
agree?
I'm going to completely agree with you, and I'm going to go against some of the things that I would have said 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I think marriage counseling can be extremely damaging if you haven't handled some of your stuff. You should talk to my husband. And this is a consistent pattern with people who feel stuck or trapped, is I spit and hissed and called names, and I'm verbally quite talented. And if somebody would pay me for that, then I would be a millionaire. I was so ugly that my husband should have left marriage counseling.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, instead of the marriage counselor being able to provide a safe environment and saying, wait, we can't do this. Those separate rooms, just like the separation when we had a restraining order, those separate rooms give you a chance to be with people who are not saying, oh, you poor thing, and this shouldn't be happening to you. Saying, okay, what are the things you can control? What are your controllables? Because if we're just going to whine, this is not, it's not helpful. It's not teaching our kids anything. If we're going to use victimese, Christ never used victimese. It's not going to work.
But you know what you find in those rooms? Empathy. Empathy. It's missing. It's missing in practically every area, church and other places. Empathy. If you're hiding and you're not sharing about your struggles, then your empathy is of no use. But if you can be forthcoming, transparent, and with the good boundaries, people relate to that. Yeah. And then you have empathy for the young woman coming in that group that is struggling. And she's going to sit there and she's going to hear from all the other people around. And it's not about, they're not all, trust me, everybody, they're not sitting there just, oh, my husband, my husband, my husband, my husband.
Because a good group leader is going to say,
we're not talking about husbands here. This is about your recovery. This is about your self-awareness. Yes. This is about your healing, your character defects for you to be able to heal and be set free.
Yes. And it doesn't take the other person to do that. You do not have to wait on them to do that, nor do you have to leave the marriage to do that. Nor, as we're learning, especially with substance use disorder, nor does there have to be a complete bottom or a complete stopping of whatever is happening for that person to begin to heal. And especially instead of doing what I did, which nag, call names, say ugly things, I tried it all, kicking, screaming, all those types of things. That one, that's certainly not the way Jesus went about it. Right. And two, it doesn't work. So what
No.
the person with the addiction is looking for is they're looking for a connection. And if you are the Tasmanian devil, obviously you're not providing connection. And I'm not saying you're not hurt. I'm not saying that you're not getting your needs met. You're probably not. We all have basic needs. Those are God-given needs. What I'm saying is if you're dealing with an empty cup, the person who has the addiction is dealing with an even emptier cup. Theirs has a hole in the bottom.
Oh,
right?
boy.
So you're going to this dry well trying to get filled. Then you show up at marriage counseling, 2 empty cups trying to fill or do their best to use their tools, when really, if you're able to work in a program like mine, if you're able to work in CR, if you're able to do that and figure out God is the only one that can fill this, that I can come from a full cup, and that I can say, hey, this doesn't work for me. I mean, one of the things that I've done lately, and I'm shocked about how difficult it has been it's been more difficult for people to interact with me with this than the fact that I don't drink anymore. I don't drink anymore for my own reasons, but when you go to a party and everybody has had some alcohol or those types of things, they're like, why? They feel bad that I'm not drinking, that I'm not joining in the part of them, right? I've asked people in my friend group, not necessarily my friend group, but my work group, I said, I'm really uncomfortable with all the swearing that's going on and how acceptable it's getting. Would it be okay when you talk to me that you don't use those words? Yeah. Right?
Boundaries.
But it's becoming so open at our local gas station and our grocery store and all those types of things. I've gotten more pushback about that than not drinking at a party. I am just absolutely amazed. So when you set boundaries, they are only things that you can control. I can control whether I spend time with that person or not. I can't control how they use their language someplace else. So one of the things that we do is really discover what I have control of in my relationship. And I can control whether I'm nasty to you when you come home or whether I just remove myself and do some self-care because you're in a state that I'm not able to connect with you on. Because what they really want is connection. Boundaries. And if I'm nasty to you, how often do you want to come home? It's much easier to go have a drink, look at porn, stay at work, all those types of things than to come home to me being nasty.
Right. Absolutely. And it's important too. He makes a decision to do any of those things. It's his decision. Right. And you are not, you generally, the spouse takes all the blame and, I'm the reason because I'm being told, no, everybody has a choice. And it's his choice. And if that's how he deals with your marriage, or if that's how he deals with being defensive or hurt or whatever, that's his doing. And that's something, or her doing. And that's what they have to do. That's the whole point of this. They have to deal with it. You didn't
see Jesus not being kind to people who said, I'm not ready for you yet.
Yeah.
He was still kind.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. You have a choice though. Accept me or reject me. And that's what we have in marriage. That's what we have in recovery. You're either going to accept God and everything he can do to save and heal you, or reject him and continue on your path. Listen, we have a couple minutes left. Talk to her right now. She's listening, viewing, talk to her, and also invite her. How can she reach out to you? Absolutely. And how can people contact you?
The first thing I would say is you're okay. And all of this that you've been carrying around, Jesus can deal with. And there are people that can help you. And this isn't so far gone that you need to just pack up your tent and pretend like everything is okay when it's not. Ask for help. Ask for help in little steps. Show up at a group. Show up at an online group. Check into folks who have programs. Look at that. You can do that privately. We've got so many resources now. Even pick up a book. All of those things will help. When you are ready, because God will help you get ready. If you pray the prayer that I prayed, God, I'm too weak to move. God, I'm too weak to move myself.
Mm-hmm.
I need help and I need you to move me. He will be there and he will be faithful. So finding me, I'm TanyaGioia.com. You can learn a lot more about the Grace and Recovery Framework there. We also have all kinds of resources, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Addiction, Recovery, Connection, because remember the opposite of addiction is connection. So what we're looking to do is connect. So the simplest thing you could do for yourself today is take a minute and breathe from your belly. God breathed that breath into you and he continues to breathe that breath into you. So if you can't pick up a Bible, if you can't remember how to pray, if you can't remember your blessings, breathe and take that 5 minutes, take that mommy time out and do that. I used to, Craig, shut the door in the bathroom and say, Mommy's in timeout. And if your guys are old enough, take that time out and breathe.
That's wonderful. Excellent. And I'll list all of your websites, all your social media. Don't forget the Sober on Purpose podcast. We'll have all that listed in the podcast notes. Tanya, it's been great. We could go on and on and on, and we're probably going to have to do a part 2 at some point. Craig. So I want to talk about self-care and, just all the other, everything involved with helping, being an instrument of care for those that are out there struggling. So we'll probably have to get together again
Thank
soon.
you, Craig.
So,
thanks for great questions and for coming out of hiding yourself. That's important.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Well, thank you all for listening or viewing. Stop Hiding, Start Healing. We so appreciate you. If there was anything that was discussed that really touched your heart, do not hesitate, as Tanya said, to reach out, take a minute, take a breath, and we will, both Tanya and I can both attest to the fact that God can heal you, restore you, give you the courage, give you the strength to get through.
Absolutely.
He will do that.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Stop Hiding, Start Healing. We hope our time together has ignited a spark of self-discovery and inspired you to take bold steps towards healing and growth through Christ-centered recovery. Remember, the journey is ongoing, and every choice you make to confront your challenges and embrace your true self brings you closer to a life of meaning and purpose. If you enjoyed this episode, don't hesitate to share it with others who might find encouragement and strength in our discussions. Be sure to get a copy of Craig's book, Stop Hiding, Start Healing, available on Amazon and where books are sold. And visit our website, stophiding.starthealing.org for more information and to invite Craig to speak at your next event, seminar, retreat, or conference. Be sure to join us next time. And remember, it's time for you to stop hiding and start healing.